The following podcast may contain adult language and an abundance of salt, so check your stockings for coal, because we're talking Fatman. Welcome back to another episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, the Salty Nerd. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the new Mel Gibson film, Fatman. And I'm joined, as always, by my illustrious co-hosts, starting with the barbarian space Viking, Matthew Vader. What's up, dude?
Hey, what's up?
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good. You ready to talk about this awesome, jolly movie?
Yeah.
Right on.
I think. I don't know. We'll see, right?
Yeah.
Ho, ho, ho.
Hello. I'm also joined by the ambassador of estrogen, Kissed by Fire, Jude.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho. Your hair looks particularly fiery today.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you're a hoe.
Well, he's just calling him like he sees him.
I would never. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
I'm also joined by the author extraordinaire, Matthew Kadish.
Hello, you twisted child, you.
Yes, I am a twisted child.
I speak for the hoes.
Yeah, Jude's hair is very Christmassy.
It is. It looks good.
I changed it a little bit.
Did you?
Yeah.
Nice. All right, guys, we're talking.
Thanks for noticing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like I said, we're talking Fatman, but before we dive super deep into this movie, let's hear a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks for calling Toyota. This is Jan.
Hi, Jan. I heard Toy-Odathon is on.
It sure is.
Perfect. I'm getting a head start on my list for Santa.
Well, we've got great year-end deals on Camry, Highlander, RAV4, and more.
But what kind of toys do you have?
It's actually Toyotathon, not Toyotathon. We have great deals on vehicles, not toys. I'm sorry, sweetie.
Okay, what can I get for $5?
Current offers end November 30th. Toyotathon ends January 4th. Participating dealers only. Toyota. Let's go places.
Save now, share now. At KCSubaru.com, we are offering 0% financing for 63 months on select new 2021 Subaru models. And during the Subaru Share the Love event, Subaru will donate $250 to your choice of charity. Go to KCSubaru.com to learn more. Submit your charity selection by 1/15/21. See Subaru.com/share for details. No down payment required. Cannot be combined with any other incentive. Financing for well-qualified applicants only. Subject to credit approval. Expires January 4th, 2021.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Jude, why don't you tell us a little bit about Fatman?
Okay. I forgot to look up the budget for this. I think it was around $20 million.
It is $20 million.
20 million?
20 million? I think it made 300. I looked on IMDb.
300,000.
300,000?
Yeah.
It's still out there.
Yeah, it's still out. It's very new.
This is a new movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, this just came out this week? Last week?
Last week.
November 24th.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a Christmas movie. So when we watched this, I did not know anything about it. And about 5 minutes in, I was like, he's Santa.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
So Santa, played by Mel Gibson, is having a hard time paying his bills on his yearly subsidy and keeps his subsidy keeps getting less and less due to the increase of bad kids. So the U.S. government pays Santa according to the volume of his output, and if half the kids are bad, he gets half the pay. So to make up the difference, the government offers him and his elves a 2-month side gig making fighter jet control panels to cover the overhead of the factory.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a young boy who got coal in his stocking in his Christmas gift for Christmas, he seeks revenge and hires a hitman played by Walton Goggins.
Goggins.
Sorry,
That's a hard
cannot
name.
say that guy's name.
How is it I'm able to pronounce this name?
don't know.
None of you guys.
Walton Goggins. See, I almost messed up. He's a fantastic actor
He is.
who is in a ton of awesome
He really
movies.
is.
Anyway, so he plays the hitman that the young boy hires to take out Santa. But newsflash, Santa's been at this for a long time, and he's kind of a badass.
Yeah.
So cue the gunfight.
Right on. All I knew about this movie was that it had Mel Gibson in it, and I've said this on the podcast
That's all I
before.
knew also.
I am a sucker for Mel Gibson movies in any genre. Like, if it has Mel Gibson in it, I'll watch it. He's just one of my favorite actors. He's fun to watch in any movie that he's in, and especially when he plays somebody who's like ultra grumpy. It's just gold.
Oh yeah, like cynical, grumpy Mel Gibson is the best.
Yeah. Even from Expendables 3 when he was like the main bad guy.
Especially like his voice, like
Yeah.
as he's gotten older,
He's very
like
gruff.
he's got that smoker, gruff voice.
That's all. I hope I look and sound like him when I'm his age.
See, he's got the beard I want.
Yeah, you should go for it, man.
Well, it's gonna get there.
All right.
Yeah.
Give us the Santa Claus beard. He's perfect as Santa.
Yeah,
I
he
love
really
it, man.
was. He was really good.
He's so good in this movie. And
I thought this whole movie was cast well.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, even the kid. Like I'm normally
Yeah.
like really critical on child actors, but this kid pulls it off. Like he's such a little.
Even that little girl that he terrorizes.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute. So the kind of setup for why this kid is so salty is he is kind of like a loner. He lives with his grandmother. His dad's like ultra rich, but he's
Billy
not
Winnan.
around. What is his name?
Billy Winnan.
Winnan.
Yeah.
Billy Winnan.
Weenan?
Winnan.
It doesn't matter.
Wenan.
Anyway, he goes to the science fair and he's like ultra smart, I
He's
suppose.
never lost
He's
before.
never lost before. He's got like 5 blue ribbons on his chest. And this is like this is his thing. This is what he prides himself on. And he loses. He gets second place to this young girl in his class who did something with solar power. And he just can't handle it. Like he's ready to murder this poor thing. So
He's basically a little rich entitled
snot. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just a little snot.
And so he hires Goggins, who plays the assassin in this movie, to kidnap this girl. And this part is really, really dark to me, but he gets the phone call while he's already on an assassination job.
Yeah.
And he's assassinating 2 people who are just sleeping in their bed. No backstory as to why he got the call to murder this
He's
couple.
got another job.
But he's just like, I'm on the job right now. I can't really talk. What are you doing? he just offs these 2 people who are sleeping. And then, of course, the kid's like, hey, I want you to kidnap this girl, bring him to my house. And, he sets her up in the basement with like this battery. He's getting ready to torture her. And he's like, you're going to call the school and you're going to tell them that you had help on your project and you're going to take the loss.
Did that scene make you wonder if he had ever won legitimately all of those other ribbons?
No, it didn't, but now it does.
No, I never got that thought.
Such a little shit.
Yeah.
That I feel like if he had lost before, this is exactly what he did before.
You're not wrong.
So he doesn't actually torture the girl. He just tells her.
He scares her.
Yeah, he scares her. He tells her what he would do with her if she doesn't recant and give up this prize. And it's really funny because he has Walton Goggins drive her back to her home. And when he gets there, he's like, you're going to go in there. You're going to do this. If you don't, I'm going to kill your mom. I'll kill your dad. Do you have a dog? She's like, yes. What's your dog's name? Jojo Beans. And he's like, I'm going to kill Jojo Beans too.
I'm gonna kill Jojo Beans too.
It's so dark. And he says it with just like this calm, collected, like
And
it's
he's
just a
like,
matter
Merry
of fact.
Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Have a good holiday. I'll see you.
That's this movie. This whole movie's dark.
Yeah, it's
Dark
good stuff.
Dark comedy, man. I don't. It's just
It is very darkly comedic, but
Yeah.
you know what else this movie does, which is really fascinating, is that it builds this whole mythology around like Santa Claus. And it's kind of funny because when I first saw the trailer for this movie, it was an action movie starring Santa Claus. And I instantly thought about the opening scene to Scrooged, where psychos assault Santa's workshop. And Lee Majors, the $6 million man, comes and helps Santa fight off all these psychos who are attacking Santa's workshop with automatic weapons in a TV movie called The Day the Reindeer Died. And it was meant to be like kind of like a spoof comedic thing for this movie Scrooged. But I was like, someone actually made this. and so like I was really looking forward to watching this film. And it's pretty much like, psychos assault Santa's workshop. But it's done in such a fantastic way. They do that thing that George Lucas did with Star Wars and that John Wick did, where they kind of reveal the world that this film takes place in without ever explicitly saying it.
right.
Yes.
Like if this had been like an 80s or 90s movie, we would have got an opening crawl that kind of like sets the stage for everything. It says like, Santa is real and, this is what he does and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But they don't do that in this movie. They just kind of let the mythology come out as the movie goes along. And it's interesting because we're introduced to the elves, we're introduced to Santa's workshop, Santa's powers.
That's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. So I thought this was really fascinating and really well done, where they were kind of like peppering in these little elements that if you're paying attention, you kind of understand like what's going on with Santa and why he is the way he is. But like early on, we get introduced to him and he goes to this bar across the street from the post office after getting
orders a Johnny Carson, which is a shot of Jack Daniels with an Alka-Seltzer.
I dig it. And then so he's noticing that this fellow patron of the bar is kind of like smoozing up the waitress or the bartender, and Santa, like it's kind of implied that he knows everything about this guy.
Well, he does.
And it's like, there's no reason
Santa
for him,
Claus.
no, except for that he's Santa Claus. And it's like, it seems like every time he's in proximity to somebody, it's automatic. Like, I know everything about you. I know everything about your childhood, and I know everything about your life right now. And it's kind of this cool little mythology thing going. We're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And they never go over the top with the magical element of this, which I thought they were going to. Honestly, when I was coming into this movie, I
You thought you were
expected.
going to see like glitter.
No, I
like
honestly,
sparkles?
I thought they were going to go full like X-Men. Like,
Okay.
I thought they were going to show Santa having like control over the snow and like him being like this omnipotent freaking
I'm glad
being.
they didn't do that.
I am too.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
I like the mystery of knowing that he's got all these magical powers, but
Yeah.
we don't know why. Or how.
And even later on, when the military actually shows up to his factory, like they show
His
the
workshop.
military his workshop. The military guys like drop this big crate of whatever they're bringing in, and they're trying to lift it up, and they can't.
They got like two guys who can't lift it up, and
Yeah.
then Santa Claus just comes up and,
And
is
just
like,
with-
he's like, hold my coffee, but and he just like lifts it up by himself like it's nothing.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so he knows everything about everybody, and he's super strong,
and he's a fast healer.
and he's a fast healer, because this was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But apparently, while he was delivering on Christmas, a couple of dudes took some pot shots at him and blew it, or like shot up his sleigh
sleigh.
and accidentally hit him, or not accidentally, but actually hit him
with deer shot.
with deer shot. And he goes back and they show him kind of like bandaging himself up and put some peroxide on it, and they make an offhand comment like, oh, it'll heal like it always does. Like, no big deal. Don't worry about it. It was just
she's like, what happened? And he tells her, and she's like, again.
yeah, like this isn't the first time this has happened. It was crazy. But again, like
he gets a gunshot wound, and then he just goes right to bed with Mrs. Claus.
yeah, it's. I thought it was fascinating that they didn't actually show him in his sleigh. They
And
show
you know what? I thought what also was really interesting and like intriguing was when he comes home and you see him like creep down the hallway. He doesn't want to wake her up, and he puts something under the bed. And we were both like, what was that? And you don't find out until like the end of the movie. That was his gun.
Oh, was
he
it?
delivers his Christmas presents packing.
with a gun.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. That's pretty funny.
And I also like the introduction of the elves.
Oh yeah, the elves were fascinating.
Yeah.
So like up to that point, you're thinking like, oh, this is kind of like more of a realistic take on Santa. But then like you see all the elves, it's like, oh no, this.
Yeah, they have
Those are
bells on
actual
their
elves.
elves.
Those little sharp ears.
Yep.
And it's kind of funny because like their entire diet is based off of simple carbohydrates.
Yep.
So it's like cookies, cakes,
Yeah.
candies.
I can't wait to.
And they're just like dumping sugar on top
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
that.
I can't wait to ask him about this
And-
because I wanted to know where they came up with this idea. Because the military, was he a general or
He was a colonel.
a colonel? He comes in and he's sitting down in like the cafeteria area with number 7, which is the head elf. He's like the foreman of the workshop, and he's like, why don't you guys eat like meat and vegetables, and proteins and fibers? Like, I think if you did that, you guys would be super strong. And he's like, no, we tried that. We find that if you just stick with simple carbs and you sleep about 20 minutes every 8 hours, it gets you the most efficient work time.
Every
Yeah.
12 hours.
Every 12 hours?
Yeah.
Oh man. It was super funny to me because like I've heard of people who are like into like entrepreneur and being super efficient. Like I've heard them test that theory out and it just goes so poorly for them.
Yeah, they go insane.
Yeah, they go crazy, and it's not the way the human body is made to work. But these elves, like they've been doing it for generations, and it works super easy. And,
Yeah.
and the
they
military,
live way longer than humans.
yeah. And the military guy is just like super impressed with how their work ethic is.
Yeah. So like the elves have like an expanded lifespan due to like their terrible diet.
Yeah,
and the military guy is so like amazed by this because he thinks that they're unhealthy because they don't look healthy.
yeah.
But he's like, oh yeah, we're very efficient when we need 20 minutes of sleep, and he asks about Santa, and they're like, oh, like he gets his powers from
Spreading joy or something
from
like
spreading
that.
joy.
It's the giving that
It's
keeps
the
them
giving
young.
Oh, that's right.
young.
Yeah.
That's it.
So like, and there are kind of references throughout the movie where Santa has talks with Mrs. Claus, and they talk about like, they've been doing this for a long time and the reason they got into it to begin with. Like they never come out and explicitly like say,
Yeah.
but they kind of imply like all this like backstory.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because like when you're watching, you're just like, ooh, I want to find out more.
Yeah, exactly.
That's,
Yeah.
that's what was cool about this movie is you do want to find out more, but you don't get it.
And
And I think that's a kind of cool part.
Little
too.
hints and mysteries and
Yeah.
like things that kind of get you intrigued. It really sells the world in this. And
Right. He's got this barn that you go in. Then there's like this whole underworld
yeah.
world.
It's a labyrinth.
Yeah.
it's an underground factory.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And even the reindeer, like he name dropped all the reindeer, and he's like, "Oh, it's a good thing that's not Blitzer or rip your package off or whatever." It was super funny. But you mentioned the relationship between.
Blitzer.
Is that not what the deer's called?
No.
Blitzen.
Blitzen? Oh, sorry. Oh. Whatever. The relationship.
Alex isn't into Christmas.
No, I'm really not.
You couldn't tell.
I'm more into Mel Gibson than I am Christmas.
Blitzer's like a American Gladiator.
Oh, my bad.
Blitzer. This is Blade. This is Laser.
He was on
This is
Running
Blazer.
Man. Blitzer was a character on Running Man.
Yeah.
one of the hunters.
Domino and Blitzer.
He's got a fake reindeer with Christmas lights on or whatever.
Put that down in the sequel.
Oh man. Anyway, I really enjoyed the relationship between Ruth and Chris Kringle, and I thought several of our listeners even commented to me. They're like, because we announced that we're going to be talking with the directors soon, and they were like, make sure you mention that like the relationship between the Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus was super genuine. Like when they're having conversations, it seems like a couple that's been married for like a really long time.
Wouldn't it be
and
funny?
They love each other.
Wouldn't it be funny if in the sequel it turns out that like they were entrepreneurs too, and like the whole chain of Ruth Chris restaurants, that's them.
That's them. That's who they. Yeah, and they just moved into the.
You know, if that was the case, Ruth Chris would just be serving Christmas cookies.
Yeah.
Like in every scene that Mrs. Claus is in, she's always giving people cookies.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is true.
Yeah.
And I also love in the final climactic showdown between Walton Goggins and Santa Claus. Santa Claus says, like, do you think you're the first?
Yes.
Implying that other people have come to kill him before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, what are those stories?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see those.
Yeah.
But it's also funny because like the kid in this, Billy Weenan?
Yeah.
Weenan.
A little shit.
Yeah, the little shit.
Do you know who he is?
No, who's that?
So I don't know if your kids watch Paw Patrol, but he's the voice of Humdinger's nephew, Harold.
Oh no.
And it totally fits. He's such a little shit.
That's funny.
But it's funny because when I was watching this movie, I was like, this feels like a Artemis Fowl movie. Because you got like the rich super genius kid who's a super villain, and he, kind of gets involved with these like mythological creatures, like Santa Claus and elves and stuff like that. And I had the unfortunate experience of watching the actual Artemis Fowl movie. And I was like, this movie, Fatman, feels more like Artemis Fowl than the actual Artemis Fowl movie did.
If this is what Artemis Fowl is supposed to be like, I might jump on that.
It is supposed to be like much
like
darker.
that.
It wasn't?
It wasn't
more
like that.
intelligent.
Are the books like this though?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
The books. Like the movie, the Artemis Fowl movie itself was terrible and not very faithful to the books at all.
We're talking about the assassin that comes to try and kill, who's played by Walton Goggins. And there was one moment I don't know if this was ad-libbed or if this was written in the script, but it freaking had me belly laughing, is when he was actually made it. First, let's talk about this first. The montage of him traveling was
great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It was every time.
I love his car.
His car is amazing.
It's like this muscly Dodge Charger.
Yeah, it's not a Dodge Charger though. It's like a Pontiac or something. I don't know what it is, but it's an awesome car. And the traveling montage of him is just musical changes. He goes from like classical to rap to like country music to talk radio to like hardcore screamo, and every time it's just him traveling a farther distance.
And he's got this hamster that he loves.
Can you talk about the hamster? Because you were super excited about this for some reason.
What do you mean?
Well, I didn't think anything of it. Like it was just like this little side thing, but you seem to really attach yourself to like, I want to know about this hamster.
I do want to know more about the hamster. I want to know. I don't know enough. I want to know what the hamster's name was, like in real life and also in the movie. I want to know how many hamsters were made in the making of this movie. I'd like to see a sequel where the whole movie is told again from the hamster's point of view.
So Walton Goggins, he has a pet hamster that he actually, being a ruthless killer, it's kind of fun to watch him like actually care about this like little animal.
He picks it up and kisses it and pets it. He buys him a little hamster wheel for the travel.
Brings it with him on trips.
There's this fantastic scene where he stops at a pet store.
Oh my God, it was so
and he's buying like little hamster stuff to, like a little hamster wheel. So like while they're in the car for a long period of time, he can get some exercise and stuff. And the woman who's with him, she's like, you know what, you seem more like a reptile person to me. And she's like, would you like a chameleon? And she's kind of showing off the wares. And he's like, no, I don't want a chameleon. And she's like, you know what, a snake. you're a snake person. And she's like, I have a great snake right here. And he's like, snakes eat hamsters. and he's like, you know what? You remind me of my mother. And she's like, oh, really? Like she takes that compliment. And he's like, yeah, she was also a bitch who didn't know when to shut up.
No, he said she was a bad listener
who didn't know when to shut up.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so well deserved too, because you could see the annoyance growing on his character's face while she's like talking about these.
I was
She's
getting
like,
annoyed
I'm
listening
really
to
good
her.
at this.
Yeah, I'm really good at knowing what kind of pets you should have. And he's just like, I don't want a snake. I don't want anything. I just want to buy a ball for my hamster.
And he really loves that hamster.
And he loves that hamster. And
in fact, at the end, Mr. and Mrs. Claus end up adopting the hamster.
And I feel like that's part of the
story?
next story, because from the hamster's perspective, they kidnapped him.
They killed his master.
Yeah, and like
kidnapped him.
his hamster dad was a really good guy.
A really good dad, yeah.
And these dicks killed his dad and kidnapped him.
You want to hear the perspective of the
I
hamster?
really do.
That's funny.
While we're talking about Walton Goggins' character, we talked about how they reveal the mythology of Santa Claus like very kind of subtly as the story goes along. And the same is true of like the backstory for his character, where we get little bits and pieces of like, who he is, what's motivating him.
Yeah. Yeah, actually ends up being a sympathetic character by the end.
He does. And it's very interesting because, up until the point where he has his showdown with Santa, like there's a big reveal there. And so like when we first see him, he's like buying other toys that Santa has delivered to other people. Yeah. Because the only thing Santa ever gave him was this like little mini cop car. And then like we see like he has these like cigarette burns on his arms from like some type of
years of being abused by his parents.
Yeah. And we get that little note about his mother who wasn't a good listener and didn't know when to shut up. And we get the sense that he's got this great resentment for Santa Claus. All right, so in the climactic showdown between Santa and Walton Goggins, it's revealed that Santa couldn't bring his parents back. And so in my mind,
he says he couldn't replace his parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my mind, basically, Walton Goggins kept asking Santa for better parents, and Santa never delivered. And because of that, because of the influence of his parents, Walton Goggins kind of went down this bad road and always blamed Santa for it, because he was looking at Santa as his savior, as the guy to rescue him.
The only way he had to turn was to Santa, a miracle, basically. Can I have better parents, please?
And Santa basically tells him, like, there's a limit to my powers.
Yeah.
There are things I can't do. It was such a short exchange, but, in the greater scheme of things, like, it explains his entire motivation in the movie. And it's such a rabbit hole that you can dive down into
for sure,
for that character. And I was very impressed with how they handled that. Because this was a movie where you had a great bad guy and you had a very, very interesting good guy. And that final showdown was very surprising.
Yes, it was. Okay, so let's talk about it. So my expectations going into this, like I said a little bit earlier, I legit thought we were going to go full X-Men with this. Like I thought Santa was going to be like this freaking crazy powerful being who like can control the weather. And when the assassin shows up to kill him and go for that final showdown, I really, really honestly expected his eyes to like glaze over as white and like for this crazy blizzard to come in,
go Super
Saiyan and just like destroy this guy and be like, you think you're the only one who've done this before, and just freaking like destroy him. Didn't happen. It was very subtle. We had like this straight up gunfight exchange. Santa gets the upper hand for a couple minutes, and then the bad guy comes out with this freaking crazy blade thing that, you know what? I watched him create this thing early on. It was like a little foreshadowing. I completely forgot he had that thing. It came out of nowhere.
And I too was expecting it to be like more magic-y.
Yeah.
And was waiting for something like the Tim Allen Santa Claus, like, oh shit, now Walter Goggins is Santa Claus. And I was like, oh, this is much more just like an 80s action flick.
It was dark.
Yeah.
And it was it took itself very seriously.
It was like Chuck Norris was Santa Claus.
But what was interesting is like, so at the beginning of the movie, Santa is very jaded because, he keeps seeing that more and more kids are just like, misbehaving and they don't care about anything. They don't believe in anything. And so, that ties into like his own business where he's basically losing money based off of how many kids are basically little shits nowadays.
And yet he has to stop at every single kid's house to give them the coal. So he's still doing just as much work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like, Mrs. Claus, she does something where she like leaves some files for Santa in his little like barn. And Santa looks at them, and they're pictures of children that he gave presents to, and then like what they are as adults. And like one of them's like a firefighter, another one's like a chef. And like Santa goes through these, and he kind of realizes it's like, oh, like, you know, what I do still matters. Like, you know, there's a reason why, you know, people are good and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so he kind of rediscovers his purpose. And in the climax, you know, like he could have just outright killed Walton Goggins, but he didn't. He was trying to actually, you know, reach him at the end.
Yeah.
And also like with when he confronts Billy at the end of the movie, like I was fully expecting him
That
to
was chilling.
like flat out like murder the kid.
That was the best part of the movie.
You never want to hear Mel Gibson say those words to you.
but it's funny because like he was, you know, he was doing some tough love there.
Yeah.
And that's like, it would have been easy for them to make Santa just like a vengeful, like revenge kill type, you know, type thing. But instead he basically tries to set this kid on the straight and narrow. And it was kind of heartwarming. I think Mel Gibson in an interview even said like, you know, yeah, this movie's dark, but it's got a heart to it.
It does.
And that's one of the reasons why he decided to do the movie. And I can really respect it because I think the big pitfall in this, the easy trap to have fallen into would be to just make it like a violent, you know, like Santa's a badass type story.
Like I said, I thought it was going to go full Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Like,
but they didn't.
They didn't. They held back.
They actually had a message of hope at the end, which was good.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that.
For my final thoughts, and just to real quick say that like one of my favorite parts of this movie, which I was, again, I'm going to ask if it was ad-libbed or not, was when Walton Goggins was shopping for a new jacket. And he was going through the coat rack, and he was like, "Green freaking blows. I look terrible and tan. This color sucks.
This makes me look fat.
This makes me look fat." I was freaking dying laughing. Then he looks over at this big white like snowboarding coat, and he's like, "I like that one." I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was ad-libbed or not, but that to me was just like one of the more funny moments in this movie, where it was just kind of like, this dude's on his way to kill Santa Claus, and he's like, "This coat sucks. This one makes me look fat." It was just a really funny moment.
Well, did you notice in the beginning when he's at the first kill job that he's on, he like is straightening the cross as he's walking up the stairs.
OCD in there.
Yeah, a little OCD going on.
And it's also funny because the white kind of camouflage ski outfit that he gets at the end is very reminiscent of the one Lee Majors is wearing in Scrooged.
Oh, really?
He shows up at Santa's workshop.
I've never seen that movie, but that's cool.
Yeah, so like I wonder if that was like intentional.
We'll have to ask him.
We'll have to ask him.
Vader, final thoughts on Fatman.
Super fun movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
you got to see it in the theater, didn't you?
I did go see it in the theater. Yes.
Good for you.
It was me and my wife and some other lady. It was like 4 rows ahead of us. I got a private screening.
Nice. Did your wife like it?
Not like we did.
Okay.
No, she didn't like it.
Okay. Well, what was your favorite part?
She didn't like, Santa Claus with guns. It's just not her.
Not her thing.
Not her thing.
She's too cheery for that.
No.
She likes the Hallmark Channel.
She did, however, like the ending. She thought there was a good message.
Okay. Cool.
She did say that. So going through all the whole thing, she did like how it ended up, and she did think it was a good play on society today.
For sure.
And I agree. It's just that's the message that needs out there. People need to straighten this shit up and quit acting like idiots.
This whole movie, Santa's like kind of calling people out on their crap and putting them back on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. Like the guy who's going to cheat on his wife.
Yeah. And it weighs on him that he has to do that. And then he realizes it's
kind of my job.
I have to get involved because that's my role in this. And I've neglected it for too long.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
It was nice going to the movie though. Yeah. Even if we were the only ones in the theater.
That's the best way.
Yeah.
What was your favorite part? Do you have a moment that that really stood out to you?
Honestly, my favorite part is the very end.
When he's talking to the kid?
When he comes to the kid's house.
Yeah.
And sits him down and,
Has his come to Jesus moment.
Has his little come to Jesus moment. Yes.
Right on.
He drinks that full glass of fentanyl.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was funny.
This kid's about to murder his grandmother because she finally figures out somebody's been siphoning all this money for a hitman. And she's like, where's all this money going? You better find out and track it. And grandma seems to be kind of a badass too.
She seems like
she's maybe not the best role model either. And the kid's like, oh shit, I'm about to get busted.
I'm going to kill her.
I got to kill her.
Yeah. It was crazy. But I like
Santa
that moment
intervenes just in time.
I think my favorite part of the movie, though, besides that, was just how they mixed together the fantastic elements with the real world. It was seamless.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, well, Santa Claus is driving around a red Ford truck, eating his gingerbread cookies and a glass of milk, going to the post office. You know? It's like, is it Santa Claus? Because you're still kind of like
questioning
at that point, and you're like, okay, it's like interesting. Cookies. This guy's either like really a whack job or he's really Santa Claus. But yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed this movie.
Right on. Cool.
It was a nice little escape for sure.
Right on.
What would you rate it out of how many cookies?
How many gingerbread cookies would you give it?
Probably 4 out of 5.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on.
High marks.
Yeah. Jude, final thoughts on Fatman, and give it a gingerbread rating.
I agree with Vader. I thought it was great world building. My favorite thing about this was all the different relationships. So I've talked about the relationship between what's his name, Skinny Man.
Oh yeah, Skinny Man.
Skinny Man and his hamster, and also Skinny Man and this boy. He thinks he's a little shit, and he literally, he has him in his phone as a little shit. But like the dialogue between them, he's like, "I want a souvenir. Why don't you bring me his head?" He's like
"That's
here's
not practical.
all of the reasons why that's not practical."
That's not gonna work.
And then the kid's like, "All right, bring me his beard." And he's like, "I'm not shaving off a dead man's beard." And like the back and forth there, and the relationship between the kid and his grandmother, how like duplicitous he is, and the relationship between Chris and Ruth. It was just great setup and payoff and relationship building and world building, and everything was seamless. Yeah, cool. I give it a 4 out of 5 hoes.
Oh, nice.
Ho ho ho.
Ho ho hoes.
Oh, ho hos. 4 out of 5 hoes.
Yeah, Jude's already claimed herself to be the queen of hoes.
There you go. Okay. Katish, final thoughts on Fatman and give it a rating.
All right, so I really enjoyed this movie. I think it will be among my regular Christmas watches going forward.
Nice.
Along with Die Hard and Scrooged and Gremlins, of course. This is a pretty sophisticated movie for the premise, you know, Santa Claus action movie. It struck a good tone between, darkness and humor and, the whole world building aspect and the fantastical aspects. There was one part in the movie where I was just like, it upset me. And that was when Walton Goggins was staking out the post office waiting for Santa Claus to show up. And they show him pouring out a pee bottle because, he was in his car the entire time. And the pee bottle is just like one of those regular like water bottles. And I'm like, no. Everyone on the stakeout knows you get the big Gatorade bottles
with the large opening.
Yeah, because you're not, you can't miss on those things. So like, I felt like that was a little unrealistic for my tastes.
He's a hitman. He has sniper aim.
There you go.
That's a really weird critique.
That's a weird critique.
He probably hit that water bottle from like an arm's length.
But my favorite part of the movie was actually where the commander was having lunch with Seven, the elf foreman.
The foreman.
And, he's kind of lecturing him on like, you guys should be eating proteins and vegetables and you'd probably like look a lot healthier and you get like 8 hours of sleep. And then like the elf just kind of like tells him like what it's like being an elf. And he's just like flabbergasted. And it was such an interesting bit of like, exposition that builds that world, that tells you a little bit about the elves and also kind of puts the humans in their place,
Like, we're better at this than you are.
Yeah. So like, I really enjoyed like that little scene because I felt like it was a good exchange. But God, Mel Gibson was so good.
He's so good.
He really was.
Awesome.
Like he's just like grizzled and old, and he's able to kind of give off that grumpy old man vibe, but at the same time, like he was also able to communicate the good-hearted Kris Kringle very well. So out of gingerbread cookies, I'd give this one probably like 3 stars, 3 gingerbreads out of 5.
Right on.
I really enjoyed it.
Yep, I did too.
Not good enough.
I echo all of your guys' sentiments. I thoroughly enjoyed this, although it did subvert my expectations. The subversion was not bad, and I actually appreciated what they did when they pulled back from the.
It can be done.
It can be done. You can subvert my expectations in a good way. I did appreciate that they kind of pulled back on the magical elements a little bit to give this movie more of a real world.
It was subtle mysticism.
Yeah, it was good. Like, because like I said, in my head, like I saw Santa going like full God mode, and I honestly think that wouldn't have worked, not nearly as well. I think the world that they built, it was perfect.
It's funny because like they never explicitly come out and illustrate it, but like Santa is just like a regular part of this world where like people know who he is, and they know what he does. And he's subsidized by the U.S. government. And it was kind of funny, that scene where he was trying to get other sponsors, where he was calling them up, like he called up Elon Musk. Yeah. Hey, Elon, how's it going? How you doing, man? And like nobody wants to like sponsor Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's weird.
It was good. But it was very good world building. Like I don't think I've seen world building this good since the John Wick movies.
Yeah, I also enjoyed. Oh, that's a cool comparison though. I know you said that before, but it just struck me. I'm like, yeah, that's a very good like on par comparison for the world building. I also like the how the assassin was trying to find out where Santa's workshop was, and it was like he was calling the North Pole or whatever. He's like, "What's the farthest city north that you have?" And he's like, and the guy on the line, he's like, "Who are you looking for?" He's like, "Kris Kringle," and they just hang up on him, and he's like, he gets so frustrated.
And he
with
eventually has to track him down through the mail system.
Yeah, through the PO box. It was good. Anyway, yeah, I give it a 4.5 stars out of 5. Wow. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It was a ton of fun. It's very strong, very strong. And I think I'm with Kate. This is going to be a regular watch for me around this time of year. So, all right, guys, that's it for our review. Stay tuned in just a little bit. We're actually going to have the 2 writers and directors of this movie on the podcast, and we're going to get to chat with them and ask them some cool questions. So stay tuned for a little bit, and we'll be right back.
Save now, share now. At CaseySubaru.com, we are offering 0% financing for 63 months on select new 2021 Subaru models. And during the Subaru Share the Love event, Subaru will donate $250 to your choice of charity. Go to CaseySubaru.com to learn more. Submit your charity selection by 1/15/21. See Subaru.com/share for details. No down payment required. Cannot be combined with any other incentive. Financing for well-qualified applicants only. Subject to credit approval. Expires January 4th, 2021. Save now, share now. At CaseySubaru.com, we are offering 0% financing for 63 months on select new 2021 Subaru models. And during the Subaru Share the Love event, Subaru will donate $250 to your choice of charity. Go to CaseySubaru.com to learn more. Submit your charity selection by 1/15/21. See Subaru.com/share for details. No down payment required. Cannot be combined with any other incentive. Financing for well-qualified applicants only. Subject to credit approval. Expires January 4th, 2021.
You know how to conference, Alex?
I don't know how to conference. Do I have both of you guys in here?
Hey, it's Ian.
Hey, Ian. I think I just hung up on your brother.
Let me try to. You want me to call him?
Yeah. Can you conference?
He's calling me.
Okay.
He's calling me. Let me add him in. All right. I think we're all here.
Right. Alex? Yes. Hi. I'm sorry I hung up on you.
We're ready to rock.
All right. Cool.
No worries. I just pivoted. I didn't straight what to do. I'm like, call Ian. We'll get in and be good.
Perfect. First off, I just wanted to thank both of you guys for joining us for the podcast. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us on, man.
All right, listeners, welcome to the Salty Nerd Interviews. And today we are sitting down with the awesome director and writers of the new Mel Gibson movie, Fatman. And they are gracious enough to come hang out with us and talk about this movie. Of course, we are joined by my co-hosts, Jude and Matt. And we're going to ask some awesome questions of Ian and Eshom Nelms. And did I say that correctly?
No.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Ian and Eshom Nelms.
Nelms.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Got it.
Perfect.
I think you said Nelsham.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I'm nervous. I'm sorry. This is like the first time I've ever done this. This
Are
is pretty
either
cool.
of you interested in changing your name to Nelsham?
You know, my parents gave me, like my hippie parents gave me a tricky name. I pretty much answered it.
Can we just call you Big E?
It would be a first, but I'm down with it.
All right, guys, let's dive right into it. First of all, we just got done reviewing the movie, and we all just discussed how amazing we thought it was and how much fun we had with it, especially with Mel Gibson. We think he fit the part really well. So my first question for you guys is, what made you want to tell this story? Because it's a very unique story, and having Mel Gibson in that role as Santa Claus just worked so well. Where did this idea come from, and how long have you been working on it?
Okay, so we'll see where the idea came from and like how long we've worked on it. So we got a first draft of this script maybe 14 years ago, and then we had the idea sort of simmering and batting it around for a couple years before that. And Ian and I had both written like two sort of short stories that were wrapped around this sort of like superhero kind of Santa, like an everyman kind of Santa that we were trying to crack. And I know one of them was like period. So we were like, oh, I don't know if we could do that one, you know. And then the other one was the more contemporary version that we made into Fatman. So that's where the idea came from. And so we left with obviously the one that we could actually realistically do for a budget that was, you know, obtainable.
Yeah.
And then Gibson, you know, so like when we first wrote the script 14 years ago, we had a very different, you know, we had different actors in mind. You know, Gibson was like, 45 at that time. So he wasn't quite on our radar as playing Chris. But he was on our radar in that we were huge fans of his, and we were obviously, you know, watching his movies constantly. So
yeah.
there was that element of it. But we had Jack Nicholson in mind when we first wrote the script.
Good one.
And then, you know, now 14 years later, he's semi-retired, if not retired. And Mel has hit the appropriate age. And so we saw Mel Gibson at a screening of Hacksaw Ridge, and he came out and he did a Q&A afterwards. And he was sitting there, and he had, you know, this beautiful bushy beard, and he kind of like was kind of worn out from the production and in the middle of the whole publicity tour. So he kind of had that burden, like he looked like he's carrying on a burden.
Yeah.
And yet he still had the spark in his eyes. And Ian and I were just like listening to him talk about that Q&A. We turned to each other and go, wow, that's our guy. Like that feels like Chris. and that's where we sort of landed on Mel to do it. And then 3 years later, when we were putting the movie together, and we started, you know, we actually formally submitted to him with a nice, you know, letter that gushed over his talents and our affection for him and how great he looked in a beard. You know, that's kind of where we were at. Like we were just waiting with bated breath. And like about 2 weeks after we passed the letter to the agent is when this event that Ian will tell you about here kind of took place. Yeah, we were getting a bunch of messages in our email box from producers and potential financiers, and people just like say, oh, hey, I enjoyed the script enough to have you come in and sit down and talk about it and see if we want to finance it or see if we want to produce it. And so we were answering a ton of those, and I got this email in my box that said, hey, I just read the script. I think it's really funny. Let's sit down for a chin wag. And we were like, a chin wag? What does that mean? And then we didn't think too much about it besides, you know, the little phrase there, because like I said, there were so many emails kind of coming in that we were trying to set up meetings to go talk to people. And I said, okay, hey, awesome, great. You know, and the email moniker wasn't like, you know, male dude 25. It was like some weird pseudonym. So I had no idea who it was. And I just said, hey, awesome. So glad you enjoyed it. Like, who am I talking with? And they said, oh, wrote back, oh, sorry, I forget to sign off sometimes. This is Mel. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I think that's everybody's
sure
reaction.
Yeah, that happened. We probably hugged, yes.
Yeah.
And then we were very pumped. And so our agent called his agent and said, hey, you know, this the guys to sit down with him for like 45 minutes at a cafe in Malibu. I'm like, all right, great, yeah, please. And that turned into like a 3.5 hour conversation with him where we were just talking about everything, films in general, talking about Fatman, talking about life. And there was this amazing moment where we knew we had the right guy when he said, he was talking about that scene where he's standing on the balcony looking out over the elves, and he was like, you know, I'm looking out over these elves, and it just seems like such a moment where I'm about ready to cry, and it's so sad, and like I'm trying to break this news to them. Well, exactly, yeah. And he goes, and I think that's what's going to make it so funny. And we're like, exactly. Like, so he got the layers and the very grounded approach that we were after, and we just, I mean, you know, like I can't say enough about the level of the actors that we got to play these roles, from Marianne, Walton, and Mel, you know, and even Eric Wolf and Robert Boxdale, who played the Captain Jacobs. Like they were some very skilled actors, that all of them that understood the layers and nuance that we were after with those characters in this script. And I mean, we couldn't have been more excited to get those folks in the role.
Yeah, for sure. They elevated the movie. It was such a treat to watch them on screen. I think, Katie, you had a couple of questions you wanted to ask too.
Yeah,
right?
real quick, kind of going in tandem with Alex's question about inspirations for this movie. When I first saw the trailer for it, I couldn't help but think about the opening scene of Scrooged, where psychos try to take over Santa's workshop, and Lee Majors comes in, the $6 million man, and helps Santa fight them off in The Night the Reindeer Died. So I was kind of wondering, was that any of an inspiration to you guys? And also the Artemis Fowl books, because this feels like more of an Artemis Fowl movie than the actual Artemis Fowl movie was.
Interesting thing is, I haven't seen the Artemis Fowl movie, and I don't even know anything about the character. I'm assuming it's a comic book or a novel, some young adult novel or something.
It's a series of young adult novels about a child supervillain, and he basically deals with like fairies and elves and stuff like that.
Okay, interesting. That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, your movie is basically like a Artemis Fowl story, so I was just wondering if that had any kind of like influence on you guys, but obviously not.
It didn't. Here's the interesting thing, and Scrooge. I mean, we'd seen Scrooge a bunch of times as kids, and as teenagers and adults. Obviously, it's one of those Christmas movies that you just keep watching and that you find on TV all the time. But I must have seen probably the whole thing once or twice, but it's one of those movies that comes on TV and you always catch it at the moment where like a ghost is like, throttling Bill Murray in some way. And like I didn't remember the beginning of it. I'm sure it was in my subconscious somewhere. But the most amazing thing about coming out with the movie and having people reference so many pieces of material that they thought, inspired us in some way, like half a dozen comic books, songs. We must have taken this from Weird Al. It was just like there's literally like a dozen properties, like the Boondocks cartoon comic strip and whatnot. There was I think there was a through line someone was mentioning that had something to do with Santa and a kid going after him, and we were just like, holy shit! Like there were so many properties that were kind of on like a peripheral. I mean, none of them were taking a really grounded approach like we did. But it was a similar enough idea of like a gritty Santa or a kid angry at him or something. And it was interesting to see that, and thank goodness, like we were the ones that brought it to fruition. But it was interesting to see that it was it was oddly on like the conscience of the peripheral subconscious of the
zeitgeist, right?
Yeah, it was like it had been almost done a couple of times, but never done.
Well, it's funny because when Walton Goggins gets his camouflage snowsuit at the end of the movie, it looks almost exactly like Lee Majors' snowsuit in Scrooged.
Dude, looking at that sequence afterward, it's fucking uncanny. We watched it and we're like, holy shit! Like he's wearing almost the exact snowsuit, and like that was absolutely like we did not watch that before. Like we had no idea, but it just kind of goes hand in hand when you think about it, right? Like it's like, oh, he's in white, like go get him a badass snowsuit.
Yeah.
It's just like common sense led obviously Scrooge and us on the same path.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And I wanted to ask you if this was ad-libbed or not, but when Goggins was going through the coat section and he was like, tan makes me look fat, green is shitty, this is garbage, I don't like this one. Like, was that all Goggins, or was that written in the script by you guys?
Some of it was written, but there are no two takes alike. So Walton would go through and like change stuff. Like that take absolutely has like a handful of like stuff we wrote, and then like a lot of what Walton just put in.
Nice, very good. Go ahead, Jude. Did you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I was waiting for you to finish.
No, go ahead. No, I'm good. I just wanted to know if that was ad lib. It sounds like that was a yes or a no question, or a yes or no answer. But it was one of my favorite scenes, and it made me belly laugh when I was watching that scene. So go ahead, Jude.
All right. Well, so this is Jude. I'm known as the ambassador of estrogen, so I have some hard questions for you as the advocate for Ruth.
Excellent.
So assuming that Ruth is also immortal, I was wondering if her superpowers are connected to baking or if they are tied to Chris. And also, I should warn you, there is no correct answer to this because the patriarchy.
Look, there's got to be some magic dust in those cookies, right? I mean, they're putting them down like they're...
You had to make her superpower connected to baking.
But I think that's part of it, right? And then obviously, what we really loved was that, she's rocking that beautiful British accent, and it just made the story like more international, right? We're like, oh, what sleigh ride did Chris meet Ruth on?
Yeah.
The other part of that is that we were having a lot of fun with the holiday tropes that everybody knows. I mean, you watch something like, I just watched Christmas Chronicles 2 with my kids, and Mrs. Claus is running around, tempting elves with cookies and running around giving cookies to everybody. And you're just like, holy shit, there's so much fucking overlap in these types of movies. But the one thing that we were excited to do was to send you down the road of Mrs. Claus is making cookies, and she's the backbone of the operation, and she's
don't spoil it though.
Order. And then there's that moment that happens at the end of the film, and we're like, that's where I think we're going to catch people a little unawares, and you realize, oh shit, like she's legit. Like she's not just some cookie baking mother.
Honestly, like that relationship was very much inspired by our parents' own relationship.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's one thing I wanted to say is that one of my favorite thing about this movie is the attention to the relationships, and the relationship between Chris and Ruth is beautiful and magical. But not only that, but the relationships between Mr. Weenan, the little shit, and Skinny Man, like that relationship their dialogue back and forth, and the relationship between Skinny Man and his hamster, and like just the attention to detail in how you created like an arc in each of these relationships, I thought was really well written.
Awesome.
And
awesome. Thank you.
To kind of
it's something we try to pay attention to. It's something that we have this credo that we like to say as we're writing. It's kind of like no character left behind. If you watch kind of some of our other stuff like Small Time Crime or Walton Street or Lost on Purpose, you see a lot of small characters that have a couple of lines. Hopefully, the idea is that they have arcs and they feel like real people, and they feel like, I can see I can see who that person is, even though he only has 3 or 4 lines, by what he's wearing, what he's saying, what he's doing. We're hoping to paint an entire world with those people. And we really do painstakingly go over those characters, trying to draw that out,
Yeah.
Right on.
Like even like the postal workers, like their costumes, like we want this like old sweater, and like oh no, it's like the one with the hole in his elbow, like stuff like that.
Right on. Well, it paid off in a big way. And talking about Mel Gibson and Marianne in this production, several of our listeners wanted us to let you know that they thought that the relationship between Chris and Ruth was so genuine. They bought it hook, line, and sinker. And I was curious to know, was that the work of these two master actors, or did you have to kind of coach them and to direct them in a certain way to make that come off on screen, or was that just a natural way that they acted together?
Obviously, we taught Mel and Marianne everything they know.
Clearly.
It was really tough trying those performances out of those amateurs. It's combination, right? I mean, we put something on paper that's a blueprint for those characters, and obviously it's modeled after our parents, in our minds, and we have an idea of what that relationship is and how we want it to play and how warm we want it to feel, even though these characters are supporting each other and going through tough times. But then you have someone like Mel and Marianne who spend time with that character and make it their own and layer it up and build their own They ask us questions, but they're going to build their own backstory and fill in their own holes and put their own lives and loves and tribulations in them. And so that when they show up, those people are ready to go. Like, I mean, they have those characters loaded, fully loaded and ready to go. And when they step in there with each other, in between takes, Marianne and Mel are just cracking jokes and laughing, and she's punching him in the shoulders, and they're telling each other stories, and they're cracking jokes with other cast and crew members that are around. And then when we say action, it pours right out of them. They transfer that into those relationships and those roles, and then they add a couple of little improv lines and moments at the end where she's holding up a rolling pin and going after him. And yeah, I mean, they had all these wonderful ideas for their characters and just really brought it. They were in 100%. There was no walking through those characters. Like, they were really thought out, and they really put a lot of thought and were 110% in when they showed up.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, and I think like you nailed it right there, Ian, with like those, like that they were able to just like go off script and do little improvisational flourishes. Like, they're living in those people,
Yeah.
So
Like it was fun to watch them work. We were giddy and giggly watching them, just living with them in those moments. And every take, we were just like, I wonder what they're going to do this time. You know, like that ridiculous.
So guys, we here on the Salty Nerd podcast, we watch a lot of movies that are not very well written. And we want to, kind of congratulate you on such great world building in this movie. We were kind of talking earlier during our review that, there are some movies that reveal so much backstory to the world in which they're taking place in, such as like, Star Wars, talking about the Clone Wars, and John Wick, where we kind of get to see like this, underworld of assassins kind of like come to the screen and create its own mythology. And one of the things that we noticed when watching your movie was that the world building in it is actually absolutely intriguing, and it starts off kind of slow and subtle, and then as the movie goes along, like you're getting so much information about like the elves and like Santa, and he kind of references that other people have tried to kill him before, and we're all like, yes, we want to know those stories. So what I was wondering was, from all this intriguing world building, did you guys really sit down and plan out like the world that this movie was going to take place in? And what can you tell us about, some of the stuff that we only got hints at, like more about the elves, about how the magic works, and, the other attempts on Santa's life? Like, do you guys have all that planned out, or was it just kind of hinted at?
Well, look, I mean, I think, like I said, we wrote a short story that had the prequel. It was a prequel in there, and so that's like has a lot of the backstory built into it. So that's something that we're absolutely wanting to flesh out in subsequent, the volumes of the Fatman. So we're absolutely nodding back to those moments that are in the prequel short story that we wrote, and then thought of beyond. You write the short story 14, 15 years ago, and obviously we've had a lot of time to cogitate on what that would be, or how in depth that would be. We've had so much time to think about the world and the characters and how they fit into it. So even little line changes along the run in the 14 years have alluded to such a backstory or world that could open up in a prequel or a sequel or a flashback or something that we're really excited to do. So yeah, I think it was our prep work, and then we were able to have enough of it, of that world built in our minds before we started writing the script. And then that was a tremendous amount of fun for us. Like honestly, like we had like a whole Word document going, and like questions that that hadn't been answered. Like one of the questions we came upon was like, well, when do kids stop getting toys? Right? Like that's never been answered in a movie. Like you don't have adults getting toys, so like what was the cutoff? So like we're like, okay, we had to come up with that. We're like, well, it can't be like Billy's 12, so this, and he's like really upset. So this has to be the last year he's getting a toy, and when you turn 13 or get into your teens, like you're cut off. That's it. Santa's no longer giving you toys, and you carry on with your adult. You get into adulthood, and you carry on with your adulthood, and you carry on with your life. Like that was something that we like had to invent a rule for, right? Like that didn't exist, and then we're like, oh well, Santa's all knowing. Like, how does that work? He'd be schizophrenic. Like all these voices and things coming into his head, like he goes bananas. And we're like, well, there has to be rules, right? So it's like we thought of it as like a dictionary. Like he looks up a word, or like he looks up a name, and he gets a download. So he's not just like, it's like when you have a thought, right? Like you're just not thinking every thought at the same time. Like you have to go find it. So if you aren't on his conscious mind, he's not getting information from you. But if he looks down a list of all the names, he can instantly go, okay, Susie, Jimmy, Diana, like all these people, like, okay, I got it. Like he has to have a trigger. Yeah, or if he runs into you in a bar like we have, and he can kind of go, oh God, this guy's got a family and a kid. Hey, look, man, I think he should be taking a different path here.
Yeah.
And then as far as like his strength and like things like that, like even some of the like the regenerative stuff that's throughout the picture, like we're gonna absolutely, like, even in everyday life we get injured, and like he's got to have, it can't be, there's got to be some sort of rejuvenation and like healing. So like these all kind of things organically through the set. And like even with the U.S. military, we're like, oh, we could just picture the pitch that the U.S. gave them, like, hey, come on up to Alaska, like you can use the postal service. We've got all the infrastructure. Like it's great. Like you're going to be great here. And then like obviously things get a little pear shaped, and now they're opportunistic. coming in on him, trying to manipulate him when he's at his most vulnerable.
Yeah,
all these things sort of came from the world.
That was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you about why he's like solely working with the U.S. government. I was like, wouldn't the UN make more sense? Or I'd think that some of America's rivals across the world would be bidding for Santa Claus.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I see a sequel, baby. There's a lot greener pastures.
Hell yeah, I'm all for it.
I will say an interesting thing that we were thinking about as to like why and where and why that type of financing and whatnot was just because we really thought that if you were going to build a world, and it's not said obviously, but it is. I think it'll be something that maybe we imply later or that we build upon a little bit because there just wasn't enough time to get all this out. So we had to lean into a lot of the choices that we made without saying it. Like, I think that if there really was this guy and the world leaders found him and they're like, hey, we know what you're doing. We know how you're doing it. And I think you would probably have half a dozen of the world's largest countries vying for him to be making it in their country. And because you can sort of see down the road, maybe Santa can't see down the road, even though he's wise and altruistic, I don't think his mind is working in a devious way at that point when he's very benevolently making these choices, giving them the children. But I think an opportunist and an economist can say, look down the road as you would look down if you were acquiring Facebook when there was no monetization of it. You could say, you know what? I could probably find a way to monetize this down the road, or I can find a way to build an economy around this down the road. And you see that that's kind of happened. You're like, oh shit, the U.S. has built this fucking incredible economy around this guy, and now he's getting pinched. And instead of being like, you know what, we've got trillions of fucking dollars that are being, made by this fucking holiday that we started with you and your name and your face. And instead of them being like, yeah, it's cool. Like, why don't we just let you continue on? They're saying, it's kind of in the contract and, well, you're going to have to do some kind of subsidization because you're kind of upside down here, pal. And it's just a contract to them. It's just business. They're not looking at it as like a way to reach down and help this guy. They're kind of like, well, you're a business now, pal. This is what you signed up for. Sorry about your luck. Hundreds of years ago when we signed the contract. We didn't want to make the military or the government bad guys. They're just all kind of stuck in this contractual agreement as to the way things work out. And that, we have friends and family that are in the military and the government. And there's certainly, a lot of it is just contracts and paperwork. And, bureaucracy.
But it's also like one thing that we researched, right? They're making those control panels, and we went down and we're like, okay, well, like even that, right? Like, what would what would they make, right? And so it was like, oh, they're making guns and they're making bombs. We're like, no, absolutely not. There's no way Chris is going to let his factory actually make a bomb or an AR. That's too far. Yeah, an AR-15 or anything that would actually kill directly. But they might be able to convince him to make these control panels. And like we researched, like very, very few aviation control panels for our own fighter jet are made in the U.S. So we're risking because it's so labor intensive. Right now, a lot of them are made in China because the labor is so low and the technology and what they're able to do is so high. So we're importing, exporting all this stuff, from a country that we may not be 1,000% friendly with right now, or have ever been 1,000% friendly with. They're the ones mass producing a lot of our defense stuff, which is crazy to even think about. Whether you're a fan of the military or not, it's a really interesting thing to think about. So we were like, well, wouldn't that behoove them to be like, if we've got Santa here and a little bent over a barrel, like, why don't we take some of this more labor-intensive high-tech stuff and let his help do it because it's better. It's going to be way better for us. Yeah, national security. You can hear the pitch, right? Like
the win-win. The win-win here, Chris.
So, yeah.
So one of the things that I find that makes the character of Skinny Man so interesting is his relationship with his hamster. And the guys have been giving me a really hard time about it because I will not stop talking about this relationship. And I have a couple of questions. I wanted to know what the hamster's name is. And I also want to know if you were open to the idea of a sequel from the hamster's perspective, because Skinny Man is a really good hamster dad. And, Santa and Ruth and Chris, they killed the hamster's dad, and then they essentially kidnapped him. So I would like to see something from the hamster's perspective.
Yeah, from the hamster's perspective, Santa's the bad guy.
You know what? Like that hadn't his sworn nemesis is now a nice furball. I think I love it. I think it's like a weird novelization, like they did from there's that book Grendel. Oh
yeah.
The POV of the monster.
Yeah,
the one with Michael Jackson's monkey. Right? Yeah, Bubbles, the animation from his perspective of his monkey. Oh man, it's crazy.
Yeah, because if you're not into the idea of doing that sequel, I'm probably just going to start writing some fan fiction.
I'm almost certain that Walton named the hamster Simon. Yeah, I remember him doing takes where he'd be like, "There you go, Simon." And that had a like they gave with Simon. So we wanted to give that honor to Walton, and he wanted to spend time with the little guy and all that stuff. So Walton had named him Simon.
It really is a beautiful relationship.
So
like that's his closest relationship, right? Like that's the truest thing in his life, and that was absolutely by intent,
Right on.
We built that hamster does a lot for us, right? So it may be not so obvious, but I think if you were able to watch the film a couple of times, I know that's a tall order, but it would start to like there's so many things that hamster is giving you about Skinny Man, right? So it's like it's the only thing in his life that he cares about, really.
Yeah,
is he's caring for this hamster, but the weird layer to that is that when he goes into the pet shop and he starts talking to the woman about. And we had this conversation with Walton as to like what and who he is to the hamster, and like it's sort of that animal exercise that you have when you're an actor, and they say pick an animal, your favorite animal. Now we'll run around the room for half an hour and only talk to each other and the fucking roars and the elephant sounds that you have. It was kind of that moment, and we were like, you are a snake. You just don't want to admit it. You don't like that you're the snake, but you're the snake, and this is a little something that you love because you've had hamsters since you were a kid, the only thing you've ever had, and you like this thing because it's at your mercy. That's the only reason you love this thing. It does everything you want it to do. It's your little hamster, but you can eat it at any time you want. So that moment where he picks it up and he gives it a kiss and then he drops it back in there very like methodically, like it's him being the snake. And then when he goes into that pet shop later and he's like, and she tells him, I think you're kind of a reptile person. Yeah, I'm very good at this. You're a snake guy.
And he gets all pissed off.
Like almost loses his shit on her.
Yeah.
You can see that it's hitting very close to home for him, and that chews him up. And then he says, "You remind me of my mother," because she's actually hitting on something very, very, very close to home for him.
That's freaking brilliant, dude.
Yeah.
That made me appreciate that whole scene in a whole new level, because it was already one of my favorite scenes, that line that he had to just kind of like shoot her out, like get out of my way, like you're nothing to me. Like now that you kind of pointed to that, like she's basically poking a raw nerve of his, it makes so much more sense. And that was amazing. Good job, guys. That's
really
awesome.
good writing.
Yeah. Okay, so I have
and that's the kind of stuff that you don't see though, right? Like you can't, like when you watch the movie, that's not immediately there because we don't. I hate exposition.
Yeah.
So we would rather someone go in and think about it and discover it on their own than be like,
Yeah.
Well, it's like what we're trying to avoid. I guess when we're writing, what we try to avoid is those moments. And this is not a knock on this movie. It's just a trope in these types of movies. But I just watched Christmas Chronicle 2 with my kids, and we loved it. A lovely picture. Right? A lovely movie. And the first one's lovely. Second one's more or equally as lovely, but in a different way. In that it goes back to that old homage to the Christmas films where they got to crack open a book and they got to tell you a story. I mean, it really leans into that.
Yeah, we were saying in our review that if this were like a movie that were made in the 80s or 90s, it would open up with an opening crawl, kind of telling you exactly like who Santa is and what his background was, and then it would go into the story. But you guys just kind of let it come out naturally.
Yeah, and I can't tell you, like, that was actually pitched to us. Like, we were like, we can't do it, guys. We can't do it.
All right.
But instead of having to crack open the book, like we're dropping breadcrumbs instead. And I think you kind of have to do that in a book, in a movie where you're speaking to children primarily, and you're trying to really kind of spoon feed this out so that kids don't get lost. Understandable.
Yeah.
200%. And it's a trope of the genre. So it feels good, and you feel like you're sitting around the fire with the family listening to someone tell you a story. And I think there's like 3 times in Christmas Chronicles 2 where they do that, and that's fucking wonderful. But in our movie, where we're speaking to adults only in a rated R environment, and they're trying to keep you, we're trying to upend the genre, right? Like, right. If the genre's going right, we're going left.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the other thing overall. Like, we made very pointed decisions not to show open a book, not to show reindeer flying across the sun or a moon, not to show the reindeer being strapped to the sled. We hinted at everything, and we showed you all the moments before and after and in between those.
Yeah.
And that was exactly what we were after, because we couldn't out schmaltz the schmaltz. You know what I mean? And then if we started schmaltzing, we were already going to be stepping on ourselves as far as the realistic, quote unquote, version of this that we wanted to tell, because there's nothing realistic about a guy going out and visiting 3 billion houses in one night. Like, it's not possible. So the less we drew to that, we were like, the less we could show and get into that garbage with flying sleighs and stuff, the better for us, because we're telling a contemporary Christmas Western, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that actually segues perfectly into my last question for you guys. So just so you guys know, you completely subverted my expectations with the big finale of this movie, because when the assassin, the skinny man, shows up to face Mel Gibson's fat man face to face, ready to kill the guy, I honestly fully expected Mel Gibson's character to just go full like God mode and like make a big blizzard come in, and you see him just become Santa Claus, right? Like I was waiting for the red costume to come out and him to just go full ham on this guy, and it didn't happen. You guys reined it in. You made it much more realistic, and I was really curious. Like you kind of already talked about it a little bit, but those decisions really helped ground this movie, and you said that was exactly what you were going for?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. We wanted to keep it in what we consider the realistic orbit. And there was a ton of like nudges that we made and choices we made throughout the picture, and even in editing, where it's like, okay, like we're tipping a little too far here. We got to pull it back. And like it felt like we were walking a tightrope in showing what we were very specific in showing and not showing. And that shootout is just to our sensibilities. Like, we love a good old fashioned shootout to OK Corral. That felt very grounded for us. It felt traditional in a way. Like, oh, this is very classic, like traditional. This should be a heritage thing right here.
Yeah.
And Santa should have a couple of very simple guns, because he's been working with those guns longer than anything else. He's not the kind of guy that's going to pull out a Gatling gun or a missile launcher or an M16.
No.
That's just too new for him. He's more like, he's a man of precision and antiquity, and he's not the type of guy that's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to grab a rifle that fires 3 rounds a second and fucking go after this guy. He's more like, I'm going to use my tried and true, and I'm going to pick this guy apart with precision. Yeah. Whereas Skinny Man's a man of now. He's like mass, consumer, more, firing, emptying clips constantly, ripping apart the car, even though he can't see Chris. You know, like he's after it. He's constantly like on that trip. One of the unseen, it's seen, but I'm just saying, one of the things we tried not to overdo, but that we wanted every time he went in somewhere, he bought a lot of shit everywhere he went. He's very consumer based. So he goes into that hamster store and he's got a basket full of crap. You know what I mean? And then he goes into this store and over prepares himself for the Great White North as he's comes out with skis and a jacket and snowshoes and like everything you could imagine. He's just haphazardly chucking it into the back of his car after he just spent probably $3,000.
Yeah, it seems like he's trying to make up for not getting those presents from Santa when he was younger, huh?
You got that void to fill.
And going back to Santa's guns, I had one last question. So there's a scene, I think it's sort of in the middle. It's right after he does his Christmas gift delivery, and he comes back and he creeps into the bedroom. He puts something under the bed, and you find out later it's the gun. So Santa is packing on his runs, and is he firing back?
I think he definitely tries to never fire back. Only if his life is in peril.
No judgment. I'm just curious.
No, for sure. But I think I don't think he fired back any on this particular night out. But he is packing. There was conversation on whether he should be wearing a bulletproof vest. That was a conversation we had.
Yeah.
I think he has the swagger, and he's kind of old school. Like you're never going to see your dad wearing a bike helmet. So that was kind of like, he's not going to wear a vest. So he's just going to take the shot.
Well, and that was one of the conversations we had about him as a person, right? And like, would he be a man of antiquity or would he be a man of invention? And I think like a modern invention. And I think looking at the way we structured his factory was very telling about like how he approaches technology. Is that like we have the idea and the vision, I guess you could say, we had for the factory and the elves was that, and which leans right into Chris, is that he takes the best stuff, right? And he kind of layers it on top of itself. So you have this stuff in there that looks old, or this stuff from the 50s, this stuff from like the old boiler room, you have things that are like 100 years old, put on top of things that are 50 years old, put on top of things that seem a little more new age, so that everything's kind of layered up in there. Of course, if we had more money, we could do more, but I think we were able to do just enough to get our point across, that it had this kind of timeless yet layered feel of antiquity inside that place. That it felt old, but also they were able to just do about whatever they wanted in there.
And I just wanted to circle back to one thing on that shootout.
Yeah, go ahead,
There's
man.
also the part of that shootout where it's like, and this might be a spoiler, but like you don't want to know what, like if Santa rose up into the air 12 feet and called down thunderbolts from the sky or whatever it might be, like you're like, okay, there's no chance,
no vulnerability.
He could ever lose here. He's like a god. He's like
nothing at stake.
You know what I'm saying? So like, so for us, we're like, oh no, he has to be vulnerable. Like there has to be a chance where you're like, well, like Skinny Man got him, did the right. Like this is going to be.
I have to say,
and it goes back to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I was completely shocked at the outcome of that gunfight. I'll just say that I don't want to spoil it for the interviewers or for the people who are listening, but it got me off guard. I actually kind of jumped out of my seat. I was like, no.
Well, that's great, right? Because you really want, like, hopefully you're like, holy shit, are these motherfuckers that crazy? And like we should probably put a spoiler alert at the beginning of this something, but they're like, did we actually go there? Right? You should. The movie wants you hopefully keep questions. That's why we hold it so long, is we want you asking those questions.
Yeah.
We want you going. We want you scared.
And you got us got us emotionally invested enough to really like have that reaction when that happened.
For sure. I think Kadish had one last question for you. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I actually have one last question, then two quick questions. If you guys have the time.
Of course. I have one 3-parter.
So obviously, COVID has affected the release of this movie. And, after having watched it, so one of our co-hosts who couldn't be here for the interview, he actually went and saw it in the theater. And the rest of us bought it on Amazon and watched it from home. And this feels like a movie that like is going to become part of our regular Christmas viewing, like up there with Scrooged and Die Hard and stuff like that. And, I feel like this movie has like a very good shelf life in terms of like being like the type of movie that creates a fan base that watches it constantly, kind of like Big Lebowski and stuff like that. So I wanted to know, how has COVID affected the release of this movie?
Well, look, there's two angles on this. So number one, I love the theatrical experience, and we're obviously sad that that's not the way it's being taken for most people, right? But our number one goal here is that everyone should be safe. So, we love the theatrical experience. We're very passionate about that, but watch it where you're safe. That's number one. But I think the number two thing about the COVID and the theater and how the theaters have been impacted is like a lot of smaller films like Fatman aren't being overwhelmed by huge blockbusters. And so there's this opportunity for smaller films to be seen and get exposure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
If we were sandwiched between two Marvel films and a DC film and the Bond film, we'd be having a lot rougher time right now. I think everybody would be, as far as the films that are out now. Like I don't know where Let It Go would be. I don't know where we would be. I don't know where Buddy Games would be. I don't know where some of the other even smaller films. Freaky, Freaky. I don't know where that would be. Yeah, I don't know where some of these films would be. It's cool that we are getting some attention because we're the ones that were able to come out, and you could say brave. The distributor's brave enough to like put the film out now instead of trying to hold it. But of course, we're Christmas, so I mean, it's either now or wait a year, And they were like, "Well, we got to go now, guys."
Yeah,
which we understand. And it's like, of course, we would have loved to have like a massive theatrical experience with the film, but I'm happy that people are getting to see it. I mean, there's the lackluster box office or whatever, but everybody has lackluster box office right now compared to what they would have seen if they would have come out without a pandemic. So, but like I said, there's the other half of it that's like, we're definitely on people. We're a small film and we're on the tip of people's tongues because there's not a lot out right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I know one of you guys has been following me on Twitter a bunch, and we've been giving out codes for the movie for our listeners, and we're super excited about it. And I think our release for the review will be on Friday along with this interview. So like we're pushing for it to get out and to get on people's screens because we had such a blast with this movie, and I think more people need to watch it. So I'm hoping that our listeners that we do have, I hope they go out and they get a hold of it any way they can because it was a ton of fun. And
we're actually rewatching it right now as we're talking to you with the volume off.
We have it on our TV in the background right now. We're at the point where the two suits come and talk to Santa.
Blitzer might take off one of their packages. But real quick, speaking of our listeners, so a lot of our listeners really like the behind the scenes inside baseball stuff about filmmaking. And we know that kind of like the directing teams, like the co-directors, has been kind of on the rise lately. And you guys, obviously, in the tradition of the Coen brothers and the Wachowskis and stuff like that, are two brothers who make movies together. So I was wondering if you could take us a little bit through the process of how does one co-direct with another director? Does one of you handle the actors while the other works with the visuals? Like, what's your workflow like?
I think the first thing that we have to admit to is like, Ian and I are utterly and completely codependent at this point in our collaboration. Like he's the left step to my right. Like honestly, like at this point, like we can't do much of anything by ourselves, which is tragic. But it really works well for our cinema. And I think like for us, 99.9% of all of our battles are handled in the writing. And when we're writing, when we're handing those pages back and forth and those scenes back and forth, like that's when we really think of our vision for the movie. So when we hit the set, like we're hive mind, like we're ready to rock. And we've been tested, and actors come up to me, ask me a question, wandered off for half an hour, found Ian by himself, asked him the same question. The only reason we know about it is because John Hawks was actually telling the story at a film festival on our last film, Small Town Crime. He was telling that he did that. And we didn't know about it until he told us that at the film festival in front of a crowd. And he was like, and they gave me the same answer. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be okay with these two directors. But I also think like we both have different strengths, right? So like we really lean on the other person for their strength. And that helps us a lot. And I think it also helps us when like we have someone to motivate us, right? Like I might be feeling a little malaise and I got Ian over there kicking me in the butt saying like, yo, you got your pages, where are they at? And vice versa. And like also when you're feeling a little down, you got someone to like cheer you up. I think for us, like, it's invaluable to have a partner in this. Like we are utterly and truly collaborators from nose to tail.
So Jude and I actually watched Small Town Crime, and we both really enjoyed it. And I was just wondering, this is probably a stupid question, but is the car that John Hawks drives in that movie, is that the same car Walton Goggins is driving in Fatman?
No, one is not a stupid question. It's a great question, and I think they're not the same car, but they're in the same motif. Right? Like that's what we're like, but there's a certain reason for Skinny Man's car. Andy, you want to go and get that? Yeah. I don't know if you picked this up yet, but again, it's something that's probably going to come up in subsequent viewings of people talking about it. And you're going to be like, oh, fuck, that's pretty cool. It's the big stuff that we're hoping it comes out. But there's a moment at the end where Walton holds up a certain object and shows it to Santa. And
It is that car.
Oh,
It's the same car as
That car
the
that
car
you
Santa
drive.
gave him.
it's the Matchbox car.
Oh.
That's awesome,
Right.
dude.
But
Yeah, that's super cool.
It's also the car he drives. And if you think about the layer there, of the one more back layer of like what he was supposed to have been, because Santa gets gifts of what they should be leaning towards. He should have been a cop.
Oh, wow.
And he had a really fucked up, shitty childhood. And he still drives that same car, which is cool, but he's a fucking supervillain, you know?
Oh, that's
Well,
awesome, dude.
Wow, that's dark.
That is really dark. I love it.
And it's funny, as you're talking to us, we just saw the scene where he drives by the sleeping police officer. And as you pointed out, like the police officer's car, even though it's a different color, it's the same model as the car he's driving. And I just noticed
I'm
that.
pissed that I didn't pick that up now.
Oh, that's so good, dude. That's awesome.
But yeah, like, and it's also like, so it's a Dodge Monaco, which is like the most iconic police car. It's also the police car that the T-800 drives in the original Terminator.
Nice.
And it's just blacked out, you know, all the police black and white taken off, and then that's what it'll take people a couple of viewings, I think, to notice all that shit and think that deeply about it, because it always takes a viewing or two before your mind starts to wander when those scenes pop up, and you're like, oh fuck, that's why they put that in there.
Yeah,
you know, kind of a moment.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for revealing that for us. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, what are the odds that you guys are going to be able to make a sequel to this?
I think it's possible, man. I think it's doing well. We got a call from our distributor and one of our lead producers yesterday, and they were like, "What are you guys doing for a sequel? What are we doing?" So I think that now that it's been posed, and that we were like top 3 on the quote unquote 4 VOD digital, you know, websites or whatever, however they
Platform.
yeah, platforms. However I don't quite know how it works, but they were like, we were third. We were third on 3 of them and 4th on the other one all week, and it was just they were ecstatic. So they're like, that's huge for us, because I mean our budget is a lot lower than the films we're up against. You know, even though we were able to do a lot with our budget, it is very small.
So think about that hamster angle, man.
Exactly. I'm jotting down notes, dude.
No, I'd be absolutely stoked to see a sequel to this. I'm a sucker for any Mel Gibson movie, and you guys.
It's got to be called Fatter Man.
we were kind of trying to think about this. Like, okay, if this is our Mad Max, like, what's our road warrior?
Yeah, right.
That's kind of where we're going. Man called Santa.
Yeah.
And definitely have that sleigh reinforced.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I
lower on the play.
I wanted to ask you guys, what's next for you guys? I know that you're supposedly working on a movie called Capture. What's the status of that? Or are you guys working on something completely different for your next outing?
That one was interesting, because when we went to go shoot Fatman, they called us and said, "Hey, we've got an opportunity to make this into a mini series for Quibi. Would you, sorry, I think since you guys are going to go do Fatman, we're going to go do that. And we're going to go pick up another filmmaker and blah, blah, blah." And that just happens, right? You got to make your choices of what projects you're on. And Fatman's our child to a certain extent. Like, we've been living with this thing for so long, and getting an opportunity to go make it with the right cast and people, we jumped at it, and we said, yeah, totally, you know, go with God, go do your thing with Capture. So Capture right now is a mini series that Quibi finished, and I don't know when it's coming out. It may be out already.
But it's called The Fugitive, right? They rebranded
it into The Fugitive, basically.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
So it's their reboot of The Fugitive as a miniseries. And then Ian and I are we've got a few irons in the oven, you know, and we're definitely looking to dip our voice and our tone into like the horror sci-fi genre.
Ooh, nice.
Oh, nice. That's one of our favorites. Right on, guys.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that does it for our questions, man. Thank you guys so much for joining us and giving us the opportunity to talk to you about this awesome movie. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's fun. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it, and thank you for having us on. It was awesome.
Yes, and I just want to say that Eshom and Ian Nelms, you are 2 very wicked children.
Twisted children.
Twisted children. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, like Santa, like Christmas at the Nelms house was great. Like, we had no trauma. Like mom and dad went hard. Like they took care of us. So I don't know where it came from, but it's out there in the world now.
Oh, I
Thank
dig
you
it,
guys
man.
very much.
We had the family cigarette burns.
All right, guys, we're going to sign off. Thank you guys so much. Where can the listeners find you guys on social media, on Twitter or Instagram? Do you guys have anything like that?
Facebook, Twitter. You can either look at us. Probably Nelms Bros is probably our most like public thing. But of course, I'm running around under my own name. Talking to people now just because that's just what I'm rolling under. But so I'm there on Twitter under Ian Nelms, and I know that we are both there under Nelms Bros, and then we're on Facebook under Nelms Bros as well. But yeah, those are probably the best places to go for personal interaction or getting updates for all your things Nelms Bros.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right on.
Nelmsbros.com. Yeah,
right on, guys.
Or Nelmsbros.com. We actually do have a website that kind of lists everything that we've done or are doing, and yeah.
Perfect. Right on, guys. All right. Well, thank you again. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us and giving us a full hour interview. That's awesome of you. Thank you. And we look forward.
Absolute pleasure.
We look forward to your next projects, and definitely looking forward to a sequel in the works. That sounds amazing.
Yes, but in the meantime, I would highly recommend everyone go out and either go see it in the theater while it's still out in the theaters, or go download it on one of the streaming networks, because Fatman is a lot of fun. It's a great Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Can't say it's safe for the whole family, but it's definitely something late at night after the kids go to sleep. It's worth watching.
Yeah.
Our parents let us watch Terminator at like 8 years old.
Well, that explains a lot, actually.
We just had a psychological breakthrough, right?
There it is.
Well, we moonlight as therapists here on the Salty Nerd Podcast.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
You too, man. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, guys. Well, that was our Fatman review and / interview with the writers and directors. Thank you guys for joining us so much. Real quick around the table, where can we find everybody? The Barbarian Space Viking. Where can we find you?
Matt Bader 74.
Right on
all the things.
Very
Twitter,
cool.
Twitch, whatever.
Well, Bader's not going to be here for the interview, right?
Yeah, but he can still call out. That's good. Jude, where can they find you at?
You can find me at I am Juju on Instagram and Twitter.
Cool. And Matthew Kadish.
At Matthew Kadish, Kadish on Twitter and Parler. And you can also find me at kadishbooks.com. That'll take you to my Amazon page.
Right on. And I'm your host, the Salty Nerd. You guys can catch me on Twitter at salty_nerd. Hang out, talk movies. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. See you later.
Amazon Prime members now get free grocery delivery with the minimum order. You'll get your groceries with 2-hour delivery. So in that time, you can finally figure out where the biblioteca is, learn how to play the acoustic guitar, and I guess get a puka shell necklace. Do a makeup tutorial, but realize halfway contouring is hard, and you're beautiful just as you are. Whatever it is you're doing with your time, your shopper will be carefully picking out your favorite organic meats, produce, dairy, and snacks while providing contactless delivery to your door. Free 2-hour grocery delivery, now with Prime.
Save now, share now. At CaseySubaru.com, we are offering 0% financing for 63 months on select new 2021 Subaru models. And during the Subaru Share the Love event, Subaru will donate $250 to your choice of charity. Go to CaseySubaru.com to learn more. Submit your charity selection by 1/15/21. See Subaru.com/share for details. No down payment required. Cannot be combined with any other incentive. Financing for well-qualified applicants only. Subject to credit approval. Expires January 4th, 2021.